Hey, it's Tom Jordan. A big question today. Where's Gretch? I ask because Michigan doesn't need a TikTok star right now. It needs a governor desperately. Have you noticed Michigan's governor Whitmer is out of pocket a bit, not around so much, spends a lot of time out of state and on the national airways, but little time talking to local media and local constituents. A lot of substitute governors filling in while she's been gone. So where is she right now? We're going to talk about this today because the state is struggling with things like declining incomes, population loss, a failing education system, and she's been busy, but busy on book tours and TikTok rather than in the trenches addressing these crises throughout the state. We got Michigan families are facing higher taxes, rising costs of living, a looming economic downturn, but that's cool because they're getting some intriguing social media content is what the kind of the feel is out there among her supporters. Is there, do you think, a lack of genuine commitment to Michigan, or are Big Gretch's big national aspirations a bit distracting for her? Columnist Caitlin Buss is going to be joining me again in just a few seconds to help find Gretch. And we're searching. We hope we find her. Just a reminder, we'd like for you to be a part of this conversation. You can chime in, you can comment, you can ask questions in the comment sections of whichever platform you're watching, be it YouTube or Facebook or X. And remember, on Spotify and Apple Podcast as well. And the best way you can be part of this and help out Tom Jordan Live is simply subscribe and click on that notification bell. We'd appreciate that so very much as we're continuing our broadcast here at Tom Jordan Live. Again, you can go to tomjordanlive.com to learn more about the program and where else various platforms are. Okay, so I want to talk about this because we do seem to see the governor of Michigan on various networks and airwaves and on podcasts, but we're not seeing her a lot, it seems, if you've noticed, I have, in the state of Michigan in dealing with some things that the legislature has been trying to deal with prior to them kind of collapsing it at the end of the year. So, well, we know one place Big Gretch is located. It's TikTok. Yeah, it was kind of spooky there, kind of strange. That was one of her TikTok videos that went viral internationally, international media discussing it as well. Are there misplaced priorities for Governor Whitmer? Her attention does seem focused on, her book tour, TikTok antics, rather than tackling Michigan's significant challenges. And they do exist, despite maybe her office's narrative and the Democratic legislator, the Senate now, their narrative as well. And a lot of residents are kind of wondering where their leadership has gone. There's an economic decline in the state. Michigan's per capita income has fallen to its lowest point ever, and it's well below the national average. And it could get worse. Could fall, year by year, even over the next couple of decades. It's not looking good, the outlook for the state of Michigan. There's a population crisis. We know all about this. It's gotten worse, far worse, even over the past year. More people are fleeing the state to where we're recognized across the country as one of the slowest growing states that there are in the country. Caitlin Buss has written about this, the assistant editorial page editor for the Detroit News. And her latest column came out just a bit ago, and it's good. It's a must read. You got to check it out. Caitlin Buss is back with me on Tom Jordan Live. Caitlin, good to see you. Thank you.
Yeah, good morning.
It was almost as if, Governor Whitmer was campaigning. Like, you could almost understand if she had been running for president, that she'd been gone so much from the state, her priorities are elsewhere, but that just wasn't the case. So, this, I guess the synopsis, the premise of your column, where has she been?
Right. It's kind of been something that's built on itself. We haven't seen her, I would say, since the election, really. She's been on social media, here and there, but even her presence on social media has changed significantly, and it's not
Hmm.
joyous. It's not, campaign focused like she was. She was also throwing a lot of policy in there during the campaign. Very adamant about abortion, about other, cultural policies that she was proud of having pushed in Michigan. And now what we've seen is almost like AI writing her tweets, very muted, style. And again, she's not out in the public. We would expect the date for a state of the state address, and I don't think we have that yet either.
Interesting. Yeah, because that would be a priority. Speaking of priorities, it does seem that well, I'm kind of confused a little bit because, her book tour it was a big deal in 2024. I think you wrote that she spent like 25% of her time out of state promoting her book. That's pretty significant in a year that was, very, I think, consequential when we were dealing with a, presidential election. And, normally she's out campaigning, but she's promoting her book, doing a lot of other things in other states. So the priorities kind of seem to be lifted off of Michigan, but that doesn't seem to have changed. You're right. I haven't seen her much. I think she did an interview with Tim Skubik, a very
Yeah,
friendly interview. She and her husband sat down with Tim and they talked things and blah, 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 blah. But
right.
other than that, there's not a lot of involvement with the local media here in the state, and it doesn't seem there was a lot of involvement with the legislature as they kind of wound down the lame duck.
Right. I think that she obviously has her sights, I think, on something bigger, and she has for a while. So I think, she was trying really hard to get on that progressive Democratic ticket that she thought, might make it to the White House. Earlier in the year, she thought, maybe she could be the candidate. Uh, and so there's kind of a drop off here now. You have to come back to Michigan and lick your wounds a little bit. She was uh, governor when the House turned over to Republicans. So there's been somewhat of a referendum on government. And, I think it's hard. I think she's probably trying to maybe recreate herself a bit.
Mm.
My guess would be into more of a moderate, but we will see, just depending on what she wants to do here in the future. That probably doesn't seem to have much to do with Michigan.
All right. Yeah. Well, so Michigan is important because right now there are a number of crises that you highlighted in your column here. One of them is the per capita income that it's fallen to its lowest level ever. It says 12.4% below the national average. Do you think
Mhm.
the governor has any inclination to address that, or do you think this is where she kind of wants things to be in her state?
She doesn't ever seem to really accept the reality of that. I mean, even during campaign, it was, I can't do anything about inflation. I can't do anything about grocery prices. Well, we know that's not true. If some of your groceries are eggs, she certainly could have done something about that.
Hmm.
She doesn't seem to really hear, why Republicans won in a lot of places in Michigan, why Trump took Michigan. Uh, and if you just stay online, you're missing a lot of connection with everyday people who are not on X or or TikTok, but are your constituents and have real concerns. And we have other problems. We have a fifth of our restaurants probably closing here over the
Mm.
next year if nothing changes. Um, we have $700 million in tax hikes that we got this year. Um, it's just, you know, I don't know what Democrats' strategy is right now because it doesn't seem to have any political, unless they're all interested in their personal ambitions. Because there's certainly nothing happening for the people of Michigan or even for the Democratic caucus or the governor.
About 3 years ago, one of the things that was troubling to me, and it doesn't seem to have changed, is this lack of, situational awareness that it's not just Gretchen Whitmer, but it seems to be the Democratic Party. You see the same thing happen with California Governor Gavin Newsom right now, projecting that this is like the fires out there are everybody else's fault. We actually were increasing the fire budgets. We've done so much work to prevent wildfires when we know the opposite is the case here. And we have Governor Gretchen Whitmer who had been touting, job growth in the state of Michigan and the population. This is a great place to live and work, and it's a great place to run a business. When we know that the opposite is true, it's almost like they're pushing people out on purpose. And then they come out and say that there's nothing they can do about it. As you said, she said that I think it was in was it the state of the state? I believe she was mentioning that, or whatever it was, at multiple occasions, that this is a global issue. She has nothing to do with it. But, the eggs were a great example, as you brought up. She could have stopped that. And now I tried to buy a dozen eggs the other day, and it was about $7 for a dozen. And I thought
Yeah.
I passed. I'm not going to pay that much. So the issue, I think it seems to be a Democratic tactic, a strategy to pretend all of this stuff is not happening. And they haven't learned over the past several years. Will they, you think, come to terms with reality and change their strategy here? Because the rest of us can see it.
I don't think they will, and if they do, it won't be all that quickly. it is really hard to see what their strategy is here. I think it's hard for them even to accept, that this might be a rebuilding period, at least as a part, and they might have to do some soul searching. In terms of Whitmer, she's very smart. She's very capable. Um, and so I think she probably has a plan here. And like I said, I think it's to kind of gloss over what's happened in Michigan, accept the wins that she had, uh, gloss over all this economic uncertainty, or decline, rather, and kind of skirt out of here, having rested on the laurels from, September and October of 2024, and let the next 2 years kind of go by, and she can reemerge as, you know, a leader of a different brand, perhaps. I could be totally wrong. I don't know what she's doing. I don't think there's been a lot of communication between her and lawmakers. She did announce she'll be doing a live stream, uh, online, and then she's also presenting at the Detroit Auto Show to talk about the auto industry moving forward. Um, I see that as maybe an olive branch to the Trump administration. She's said that she would want to work with them. But again, kind of funneling back to this economic focus, things are great here, we're moving forward. And unfortunately, that's just not reality for a lot of Michigan residents.
Yeah. I for one, actually, even though I see the hypocrisy in this, I'm glad that she's offering that olive branch to the Trump administration. And she came out and said that, she believes that Donald Trump actually does really care about the state of Michigan. And she heard the voters, the direction they want to go. So she's going to walk in that direction. But I guess it's troubling because for so long, she has also taken part of this, equating Donald Trump with, Adolf Hitler and that kind of thing. And I feel like she's lost some credibility there. Like she's lost some clout because we now know that when she said those things, she didn't really mean it because now she wants to work with Hitler, apparently.
Well,
Yeah,
that's
go ahead.
the risk of when you're in a position of governing, and it's a bipartisan position, you're governor for all the people of Michigan, to then take that dive into such deep campaign style, and that kind of rhetoric, and then to have to reemerge into a governing role. It's a really hard position. That's typically why a lot of people have stayed away from doing that. But now in the era of social media, it's a wild west.
Yeah, it's really difficult to show respect to someone who was saying those things and suddenly flipped on a dime, on November 6th, the day after the election. I want you to talk about the population loss in Michigan because this has just been getting worse year by year. And you wrote that the population loss in Michigan has doubled in a single year, right? With the state now ranking 46 across the nation in population growth. And who knows, pretty soon we'll be 50th if we continue on this trek. So, she keeps talking about this, but do you see any? I mean, we can just look at the legislative agenda in the lame duck and how they wanted to ram down these policies quickly, which Gretch and Whitmer would have signed if they got through. That would have hurt business in the state. And some of these already will hurt businesses in the state, which in my view means the population decline is only going to be exacerbated by these continuing policies that seem to get worse and worse for small businesses and large businesses alike. So you mentioned the Population Council.
Yeah.
I know they had some ideas out there. I think John Rakolta was a member of that, and it sounds great and whatnot. But is any of that going to be implemented? Do you think?
No, this has been one of the biggest failures. Our outbound migration more than doubled from 2022 to 2023. We did make some of that population up, immigrants and others coming to Michigan. I don't think if you look at the demographics, it's a ton of, young families in, high knowledge jobs with a strong investment in the future of Michigan. There's probably some of those people, but our population is a huge problem. This population council has done absolutely nothing, even with the big names on it. The ideas that are coming out are the same thing we see out of the legislature: transit, childcare, community amenities. If we build it, they will come. I just don't, economically, we have not seen that bear itself out. Michigan has a lot of, looking at snow right now, there are a lot of other places people can move to. The biggest draw to Michigan could be a hospitable business environment, a good environment for workers that gives them freedom, the ability to move ahead. We heard all throughout the presidential campaign about the middle class. It did start in Michigan, and we could restart here with lower taxes, more jobs, and a broad-based economic policy where we're not handing out hundreds of thousands of dollars in job subsidies that never are, you know, created. There's so
Mm.
many things we could do to grow the population here, and we're just not doing it. We keep nipping around the edges, uh, you know, creating solutions to problems that don't necessarily exist.
Yeah, I don't know why we keep going back to those failed ideas like public transit. That has been something that has been brought to voters that is over and over again, year after year, and it's not something that people really want. You know, and Michigan does have this. We've seen it. We have old case studies that Michigan does have an ability to draw, hundreds of thousands of people to the state if there are opportunities. We saw that in the early 20th century, and that's why people came here. It wasn't because of the weather. It wasn't because we're becoming more like California. It's because we had unique opportunities, and those opportunities dealt directly with businesses, which allowed people to come up even from the warm weather states down south to the great state of Michigan. So I don't
And
know. I mean, do you think she'll address the root causes? I mean, what are the root causes, do you think, of this mass exodus out of the state?
No, I think some of it is natural, obviously, you know, deindustrialization of the country, but there's a lot that we're doing wrong. And I don't see anyone taking this seriously, except for some now up and coming candidates as we look forward, you know, to the governor's race next year. Um, but Michigan goes through these cycles. You know, we had the lost decade during Jennifer Granholm. You know, we had the years under Whitmer. In the middle, we had, you know, some economic progress under Rick Snyder. I hope we go back uh, to, you know, more reasonable policies moving forward, perhaps even over the next 2 years. The House can force common sense out of anything. But it is, you know, it's not good for investors. It's not good for growth to have such uncertainty and such reversals of policies that have worked.
Hmm.
You know, many times Governor Rick Snyder has said everything I did, you know, has been eliminated, and it's frustrating for him because we were in a better spot, you know, before Whitmer became president.
No question about it. I
Governor.
mean, all
Excuse
those
me.
things. Yeah. Rick Snyder, though, I mean, to that point, he did so much. He understands business. He understands what attracts business internationally to come to Michigan, to come to Detroit. And he implemented so many policies, and I think in a pretty humble way. And unfortunately, his legacy has been marred. I think in large part by the legacy media. They don't like Republicans, whether it's a Rick Snyder or Donald Trump. They're very different types of Republicans, but Snyder was very focused on the economy, and he did a lot. And now we have a state that, you're right, it's been reversed. You look at the right to work laws that has been overturned, and now unions seem to have dominance, not just in the automotive industry, in business, but in education. And you wrote about education too, and the fact that we're not prioritizing the actual teaching of children K through 12. We actually seem as a state now to be prioritizing whatever the union demands are for the teachers and the job security. Like, they could never be fired even if they're continually failing children. So what needs to happen? I mean, is that a big part, do you think, the education aspect of this, that people are leaving the state?
Yeah, I've come to think it may be just the biggest part. You know, we are failing Michigan kids here, and it is something they deserve. They deserve how to know how to read, write, and get out of public school with the basics and a strong, you know, emotional foundation too. We are just not doing any of that. There is no structure for accountability. Following the pandemic, the literacy rates were abysmal. When you look at the school aid budget, $23 billion. I think we put 150 million towards literacy. You've got to get back to those fundamentals. I do believe that there will be some change over the next few years in our education structure because, um, you know, we're hemorrhaging kids from public school. We had a report out in Detroit News today, the free preschool. They need 14,000 more kids to make sense financially to be offered
Hmm.
in universal preschool. There's
Wow.
a lot of places we could get those kids, you know, either if the education system was attractive, if we had a bigger population, if we weren't affording kids. Um, so I think, you know, there's a lot of failure all around, and solving that education problem could do a lot for Michigan.
The lame duck. We brought that up a couple times a year, but why was Governor Whitmer absent during that? I mean, I'm kind of glad she was, because a lot of those policies were really bad, and some of them did not get through. But
Mhm.
why was she not involved in that? I mean, the governor is a pretty good negotiator, and she was absent. Why do you think that was?
I can only think that she didn't want them to get through, which is perhaps a little confusing. Some of those were the pension bill. Uh, she was very muted toward the end of that session about what she wanted. Uh, you know, she came out saying she wanted transparency, she wanted disclosure. Um, she even wanted some form of corporate subsidies and welfare to continue. None of that really materialized. Like I said, I don't know if she's trying to rebrand or just wanted to cut and run from that stuff, but it doesn't seem, like she wanted it to get through, honestly.
When I say, when I see someone's, and I think you're right. I think she wants to rebrand, so they're in strategy sessions. But the best way to rebrand is just to show up to work and get things done, as she likes to say. And you could look at Ron DeSantis. When he was thinking about it, he was going to run for president, what did he do? He ended up showing up to work as a governor all the way through that legislative session, well into the summer before he announced his candidacy, because he wanted people to see that he was on the front lines in his state, properly governing. And I think that enhanced his brand. Now, it didn't work out for him through the primaries, but still his brand was strong because people knew he was a hard worker. He stood his ground, and he I think adequately explained why he was doing things. Governor Whitmer, if she's reshaping her brand right now, is not doing that.
Right.
Is that going
You
to
know,
affect her negatively, do you think?
I don't know what will happen. I don't think her staff is necessarily all that, um, helpful to her in kind of challenging her on certain things. I think she could use a couple other people to question some of the decisions that are. But you're right. She has not communicated clearly. I don't know that she's had a public address since her last State of the State. Um, and that is the key for any politician is clear communication. I also think Ron DeSantis, made what he could of Florida, and a lot of people didn't agree with the policies, but he kept pushing for
Mhm.
Florida. And
Yeah.
to have results out of your own state is really the best, proof that you're a capable leader you can have.
Yeah. I guess my last question to you. I mean, we got 2 years left now for Big Gretch. Can she turn this around?
I think she certainly could. I think she could come out of 26, with a nice spot on the national stage, one way or another. She's had a long career, and it's not been for naught. I don't think she can turn it around in Michigan in 2 years. Hopefully, we can get some minimum wage change, some really practical stuff done here early on. But I expect we'll see a slowdown in state government, and uh, the campaign for the next governor will start quicker than ever. And uh, like I said, she might be screwed off into a national spot, kind of like Jennifer Granholm did.
Yeah. Well, I appreciate you writing about this and you talking with me about it. I think it's incredibly important that something shifts, that we have a governor, whether she's Democrat or whether it's a Republican, that's actively engaged. Not saying that they're actively engaged and not just saying they're getting stuff done, but they're actually doing it, and they're doing it with the whole state in mind, Republicans, Democrats. And I remember in 2018, that's what she said she was going to do. She was going to bring the state together. She'll work across the aisle. Haven't seen much of that yet until she just said she's going to try to work with the Donald Trump administration. Caitlin Buss is, of course, writing all about this. You can see her stuff in the Detroit News, DetroitNews.com, as the assistant editorial page editor. Caitlin Buss, always good to see you. Thank you so much. Appreciate it.
Always good to be on. Thanks.
Thank you. We'll talk soon. I think it's a good point. I'm glad it was brought up because we're starting off 2025. It's a new session legislatively in the state of Michigan and really across the country, and things need to shift. The people have really spoken, and when you look at the state of Michigan, they voted for the Republican candidate in the White House. They brought back a Republican House of Representatives in the state legislature, not the Senate, but the House. So that at least shows there is a shift. We are purple. The state of Michigan is once again. So let's let's govern. Okay, let's govern down the middle. That's the best way to do it. because, leadership is about service. It's not really about self-promotion. And it seems that's what she's been up to a little bit. Whitmer's extensive out-of-state travel for, a book tour and media appearances, while Michigan families are struggling with rising costs and declining incomes. It's a concerning seeming misalignment, if you will, of priorities. You know that the per capita income in Michigan is at its lowest level, as Caitlin Buss had written about. The state faces economic stagnation, and Whitmer's fixation on social media content and TikTok videos does nothing to help businesses thrive or put money in residents' pockets, even though she keeps saying that is what she has been doing and that is something that she will continue to do. But what about the economic policies that have been proven time and again to foster economic growth in the state? You reduce taxes. You don't increase taxes. You create jobs by doing that. You deregulate so many of the overregulation in the state. Just take them away. That alone creates more revenue for the state, more revenue for citizens of the state. It creates a lot more jobs. And she's not doing that. So as a result, we're seeing the growing exacerbation of this population loss. And I would associate that with just a failure of the state. There are all these councils that they put together, like this Michigan, I forget what they call it, but it's a population growth council. But it's only gotten worse since we spoke with some of the people, I don't know, a couple years ago regarding that. And everyone's optimistic when the report comes out, all the suggestions that we need to do, but then they do the opposite. They don't put these, ideas into practice. So Michigan's ranking near the bottom in the country for population growth is a direct result of economic mismanagement. We hear that word a lot now, mismanagement. We see it with Gavin Newsom out in California. We see it in Illinois. We see it in Michigan. We see it in New York. These states that, yes, they are being led by progressive, far-left socialist Democrats. You can call them, I think very fairly, call them that. And people, as a result, can't find good-paying jobs. They can't find affordable housing. And affordable housing isn't solved by the government now using taxpayer money to build housing projects for people. That's what they did in the Soviet Union. You can go to these various countries, by the way. I was in Budapest a few years ago, and you can see by the architecture and the designs who was in power at what any given era. And beautiful buildings. The architecture is incredible in Budapest, except for that period where the Soviet Union was in control, and they were the projects. They were the socialists' idea of providing housing for people, and they were run down and awful. And is that what they want to do in Michigan? I don't know. But if you can't find good-paying jobs, you can't find affordable housing, and you're not going to have quality schools. And then as a result, people leave. So the governor has extensive ideas, very expensive ideas too, vague proposals like public transit expansions instead of meaningful reforms to reverse the exodus. So it was the Growing Michigan Together Council. That was the population growth council they put together, but it's failed to produce actionable solutions. Expensive ideas that are pretty vague, they lack specifics or any feasibility with them, and the economic revitalization doesn't come from bureaucratic councils. You can have ideas, but they've got to be actionable and they got to be put into place. And these are the kind of policies that attract businesses and retain workers and create an environment of opportunity. But that's what everybody wants, right? So hopefully in the next 2 years, she corrects course here. And the entirety of the legislature does as well. And they turn Michigan around. I hope she does that. I'm rooting for her to do what's right because she's the one in power. Reverse the population loss. It could be a good legacy if she does that, or it could be a legacy of missed opportunities and, again, misplaced priorities. Okay, let's get some headlines here. There is another governor of Michigan, a Democratic governor. It's the former governor of the lost decade, they call it, Jennifer Granholm, now Joe Biden's energy secretary. Jennifer Granholm's 2023 electric vehicle road trip, do you remember this? It was branded as a showcase of the Biden administration's Investing in America agenda. It's been exposed as a fiasco of this taxpayer-funded waste, fraud, and abuse, which I think accurately reflects the Biden administration's 4 years in office. It's a damning report from the Department of Energy's Inspector General. Reliable report here, and reveals that the former Michigan governor and current energy secretary's journey that she took was plagued by fiscal mismanagement, policy violations as well. And there she is being interviewed, very friendly interview with ABC News. How wonderful it is that she's doing that. The 4-day summer, it was a PR stunt, a lot of people say, from Charlotte, North Carolina to Memphis, Tennessee. Very expensive lodging costs that exceed federal per diem rates. You know, she spent too much on that. There were travel vouchers riddled with inaccuracies and egregious misuse of government-issued travel cards. Staff even disregarded the department's 15% tip policy. This is basically like a systemic failure to follow their own rules, their own federal travel regulations. But the controversy was worse than that. I mean, it deepened when reports emerged that, the gasoline-powered department vehicle blocked an EV charging station in Georgia, that people who had electric vehicles were not allowed to use that charging station for quite some time because Jennifer Granholm was coming soon, and they wanted the photo op to show that it was so easy to get first in line there to charge your vehicle. Look, they're not crowded. Well, that's because you had a government gas-powered vehicle blocking access from other people who were waiting for a very long time. In fact, a family with a baby was famously stranded from her because she had to be in front of the line because of that video right there and that kind of, photo opportunity. So that was exposed, thankfully, because of social media. Thankfully, the ABCs there and the Good Morning Americas of the world weren't really covering that aspect of it. It was the social media, the independent journalists who were able to bring this up. So House Oversight Chairman James Comer lambasted that trip as evidence of the Biden administration's reckless disregard for taxpayer dollars. He warned the publicity stunt showcased the detachment of radical environmental policies from everyday Americans' realities. And it was delivering waste and frustration instead of progress. All right, so things are going to be changing up in the cabinet, and as a result, we got confirmation hearings for the Trump administration starting today. It's going to be Pete Hegseth is going to be the guy. They're going to be focused on high stakes test for the Donald Trump's pick for Secretary of Defense. That's him there on the right there. A lot of members of Donald Trump's, I guess the picks for the cabinet are going to be talked to. People like, I think, Pam Bondi, and that's other people as well. So we got the Senate Armed Services Committee kicking off today, Pete Hegseth's confirmation hearings. And all eyes are on the Trump Secretary nominee. Hegseth is former Army National Guard officer. He was on Fox News for many years. He was a commentator and took part, of course, in their morning shows and various aspects of the broadcast with Fox News. But he's entering the process with a lot of bold promises to overhaul the Pentagon. He vowed to cut the social justice and politically correct garbage, get it out of there. And that, he says, has weakened the military's focus on war fighting and war readiness. So Hegseth's stance on women in combat is sure to stir a lot of debate in that regard. While he supports maintaining high physical standards, he's made it clear those standards won't be compromised to boost inclusivity. They're going to be the same for whoever wants to join the military. It's about protecting the people. And critics accuse him of undermining gender equality. But Hegseth says, listen, his priority is military effectiveness, not ideology. Let's have the strongest military in the world, whatever that takes and whatever it looks like. So beyond policy, the nominee faces intense scrutiny over some personal controversies in his life. He's going to have to deal with this. There was a 2017 sexual assault allegation against him, claims of excessive drinking. I believe that he said he's not going to drink at all if he gets this position. He's addressed those issues head on. And he says, I'll have total transparency about my life and professionalism as well. So we got these rising threats from China and Russia, which we'll get into in a moment with Christopher Wray's comments. But Iran is another big threat to this country. So Hegseth's plan to refocus on lethality is the way he put it. Make the military lethal. encounter these U.S. adversaries. All of that's going to be central to his pitch as to why he would be the most effective defense secretary on the grid, on the map right now, out of any other potential candidates. There's a slim, obviously, Republican Senate majority. There are some minor defections. It could derail his confirmation. This hearing today is going to be a crucial test for Donald Trump's defense and his agenda as to why he believes Pete Hegseth is the guy for that job. Okay, now let's get to Christopher Wray, the outgoing FBI director. Christopher Wray, obviously he's stepping down. He and Trump don't get along, so he's going to leave office. But he's issued, before he leaves, a stark warning on China's growing threat to the United States. It was a striking, pretty, farewell interview with 60 Minutes. Scott Pelley there, you see there. That's the interview we're talking about, that the outgoing FBI director delivered this sobering warning about the Chinese Communist Party, the CCP. And he labeled it the defining threat of our generation. Just days before stepping down on January 20th, Christopher Wray says China's ambitions to undermine American security and sovereignty are their priority. He says China's cyber program is unparalleled. It's larger than the rest of the world's programs combined. That's what Christopher Wray said. They've stolen more personal and corporate data than any other country. And their malware lies in wait, like they're very sophisticated with our critical infrastructure in this country. And it's poised to cause havoc at a time of their choosing. So, the targets that he was talking about range from water treatment plants, energy grids, telecommunications, transportation systems, and others as well. So Christopher Wray, he was appointed by President Donald Trump during his first term, but he acknowledged his resignation follows the president-elect's decision to appoint Kash Patel as his successor. And while Wray defended the FBI's actions in controversial cases, including the Mar-a-Lago raid and the search, he focused on his desire for an orderly transition, thankfully, avoiding further politicization of the Federal Bureau of Investigation. And, the timing of Christopher Wray's warning comes as, federal officials are linking these CCP-backed hackers like the Salt Typhoon Group to major breaches in the United States. I believe what Christopher Wray says here. Telecommunications are just part of the problem that are at risk. And the question is going to be remaining here during this second term of Donald Trump. Is America prepared to counter a regime with these ambitions that Wray warns could inflict real-world harm on the United States? Imagine that if they shut down the energy grid in this country, or they infected the water supply in this country. They seem to have the capabilities to do just that and then some. They also have a stronger Navy right now than the United States does. And that's particularly important out in the, South China Sea, over in Asia and Taiwan. What's going to happen with that? And if that happens, will the United States get involved in a war? All these things are real world risks, not to mention the number of Chinese nationals who have come into this country illegally over the past 4 years. Many, many, many of them have. Okay, those are the headlines right now. Let's get to some comments and questions if we have them. Of course, Cameron Harris, as always, is watching those come through here on Tom Jordan Live. We got a few here. Let's start with Harry Sakilian. Hi, Harry. Good morning, Tom. Good morning, Harry. I think Whitmer is using the Granholm model. Michigan is just a stepping stone to her career advancement. Regards, Harry Sakilian. I agree with you. I think she's always had this kind of ambition for higher political office. She had that when she was the Senate minority leader in Michigan's legislature. She took some time off, became a prosecutor in near Lansing in that area, and then she got back into politics, and she spent probably a couple years preparing to run for governor. She got the gig, and the next logical step as from a governor's position would be, federal office, the presidency, maybe the vice presidency. So I think that's been on her table for quite some time. And that's why you see her a lot on the MSNBCs and the CNNs, those networks themselves who have taken a harsh beating in terms of now their reputation is down the tubes as well. And I think Gretchen Whitmer's is kind of following their lead on that and her reputation. I think her star has fallen a bit. I think she can turn it around, but I don't think she's got the credibility that she had, especially with the way that she's been out of the state the past year quite a bit, promoting herself on these major networks. She rarely speaks to the majority of reporters in the state of Michigan, and she very much controls the narrative of what's allowed to be said on these various media platforms. And that's why I think she likes social media so much. So we'll see if she turns it around. But I hope she does because I want what's best for the state of Michigan. But I do find that if she does do that and like in 2018, she was promising that she was going to be this moderate Democrat, that she was going to work with the Republican legislature very effectively, very well, but she didn't from the very get-go. She turned against them, and when she had the opportunity, she took unilateral control of the state. She has these authoritarian tendencies that she can put aside for a little bit, but then when she has that opportunity again, that's my fear, that she will implement those authoritarian tendencies once again, maybe not just in the state, maybe at federal office as well, if she so succeeds in that endeavor. Harry, thank you so much. I appreciate your always being faithful to chime in here. Thanks so much. Let's bring up another one. It's Taz is back. Taz, I appreciate your faithfulness as well and being a regular on the program. Until our Michigan government gets transparent, do not allow themselves to keep information from the citizens. We can only assume they're doing things to benefit themselves versus the citizens. I agree. Because we can't know anything else, can we? We can only speculate. And you know what happens when you speculate? You start coming up with theories about what's really going on behind the scenes. And if you want to dispel any conspiracy theories, then just be transparent. And I'll go back to the case against the former Speaker of the House, a Republican, who with a major investigation into the scandals and how he took, donated money and used it for his own purposes. And you come to find out there were a lot of people involved in that with Lee Chatfield. Lee Chatfield was the former Speaker of the House in Michigan. He was caught up in a lot of very embarrassing things that went public by, this Whitmer administration and the Attorney General Dana Nessel publicizing the things that Lee Chatfield did. And then we come to find out because someone in her office revealed that actually there were a lot of people in office in Lansing that were involved in this as well. And they were being somewhat protected by Dana Nessel because many of them are Democrats, and a lot of speculation. Okay, who were these people? And there have been names bandied about, but we can't know for sure because it's all being hidden. And Dana Nessel actively kept those names from the public. The evidence that was supposed to come out to reporters after, I think, a 53-day period, she stepped in and she asked a judge to keep those documents sealed. And what we were told is that there was a lot of embarrassing information regarding a lot of Democrats that apparently she wanted to protect. So there you have it. Transparency is important if you want people to ever trust you again. That's not just Whitmer. That's Dana Nessel. That's Jocelyn Benson's. That's the whole group, the whole gang there in Lansing. All right, let's bring up another one here. We got Walter P. Duro is back. The Michigan legislature voting record demonstrates that the so-called lost decade was bipartisan. Socialist central planning increased taxes. Well, Walter, you're kind of right there because we had a GOP House and Senate during that, but it was led by Jennifer Granholm. And she herself is definitely a socialist-leaning individual. We see that the way she's been, the way she governed very openly in the state of Michigan for 8 years, but also how she's run the energy department for Joe Biden. It's a very socialist tactics that she's using in terms of projection, claiming that if we go all in on renewable energies, and all of us drive electric vehicles, we are going to separate ourselves from China and become energy independent. It's this total gaslighting of what the reality is. It's not true. And I think most people that look into this issue understand that the more we go into renewable energies, the more we follow Jennifer Granholm's lead on this, that means we're going to be more aligned and under the thumb of countries like China because they control that industry. And Jennifer Granholm kind of praises China. But they're the ones that are building like a new coal plant every single week in China. So there's a lot of myths with Jennifer Granholm. I agree. There's plenty of blame to go around, but it is primarily And I think you believe this too, Walter, that is primarily the Democrats who are in Lansing right now are you mentioned socialists. They are the socialist leaning group of people. And if they believe that way, they should embrace it. Many of them have publicly in the past, but now it's not so in vogue to be socialist anymore. So they're kind of keeping it under wraps. Walter, thank you. Appreciate it. Another comment here. It's from Arlene Pearson. Hi, Arlene. It's always good to see you, Arlene. Thanks for your comment today. So ironic that Ray now broadcasting that China is our greatest risk. Where was he 4 years ago with his concerns? In Mar-a-Lago, looking for presidential papers, focusing on white supremacy, DEI, in our FBI. You're so right, Arlene. I thought the same thing because he didn't come out right away. I don't remember back when Joe Biden was saying the greatest national threat to our country is white people, is what Joe Biden had said more than one time. It's white supremacy. And we're looking around, and I had someone else, this guy who's well known in Michigan, Joe Spalding. He ran for Ottawa County, something or other at one point. I think lost that. But he's an activist, and he said that there's no question, by far and away, the greatest terrorist threat to this country are people with my ideology, like Christians, white people, I guess. Since I'm white, I guess I'm a huge threat. And people like me. And he didn't make clear what my ideology was. In fact, when I told him my ideology, he said, "How dare you claim that I was saying Christians are the greatest threat?" I'm like, well, that's my ideology. I'm a conservative Christian. So I don't know where he was going, but he basically said that people like me are by far and away the greatest threat regarding terrorism to the United States. And it's just the opposite. It's all around us. We can see, obviously, who is chanting in the streets, calling for the overthrow of the United States, calling for intifada, calling for an insurrection. Those are the people. And I think maybe he's referencing January 6th, which is not my ideology. I didn't support January 6th, going there and rioting like they did. In fact, I condemned it. So I don't know where he was going. But that is the prevailing narrative, back to your point, that the greatest threat is not China. At least it wasn't when Joe Biden was saying those white people are the greatest threat to the United States, when in fact they knew then, as Christopher Wray knows now, that the greatest threat right now is China. And then you can see what's boiling over in the Middle East right now. That is a huge threat as well. Iran, major threat, terrorist-wise, to this country as well, because they are the largest funder of terrorism in the world. And they've brought, I don't know how many people, I don't think the government knows how many people over here from places like Uzbekistan and Iran and Pakistan and Afghanistan and all these countries that want to do the United States harm. They've come in. They've come right in that southern border and now the northern border as well, pouring into this country, and we don't know where they are. Those are the threats that Christopher Wray should have been more vocal about a few years back, when it was the case back then as well. Arlene, always good comment. Thank you so much. I'll bring up one more here before we say so long for today. Jim Chikowski is back. Hi, Jim. Good to see you. I hope her political aspirations are over. Probably will become a lobbyist after her term. I don't know. I don't think her political aspirations are over. Maybe they can be forced to be over. If the media did their job, they would be over, because they would point out her hypocrisy and the things that she truly has done as she's been governor. And this state right now is worse off, far worse off now than it was, 6 years ago when she took office in 2018. Well, 2019 is when she took office. She was elected in 2018. It's far worse now. And I've said this before, where we have come since 2018 is worse than California was when I left that state in 2013. It is so bad now in the state of Michigan. And you can name the issue, whether it's education, whether it's illegal immigration in the state. I wouldn't say illegal immigration is worse in California, but it's far worse now in Michigan than it ever has been before in such a short amount of time, because we're welcoming that element into our state. And when I say that element, I mean the criminal element of this. The robberies and the burglaries and the dangerous crimes that are committed in Michigan has gone up exponentially. They're coming from places like Central and South America and Mexico. That's where these criminals are coming from. So, okay, you can say all you want. That's just the reality of it. And the sheriffs in the state know all about it, because they're trying to push back on these gangs that are coming through. So Chile is another place they're coming from as well. So yeah, it's bad, and I do hope that her political aspirations are over as well. And whether or not she becomes a lobbyist, that's up to her. But I don't think they are. But I'd like for that to be the case. Thanks very much. Appreciate it. Remember, you can find us on Apple Podcast, on Spotify, on YouTube, on X, and on Facebook. And if you have further questions, go to TomJordanLive.com. So appreciate our audience. Thank you so much. We'll see you back here tomorrow, streaming live, 9 a.m., Tom Jordan Live. God bless you.